Detective Ryan Hayes had been wearing a badge for 15 years. Somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten what it really meant to serve and protect. In his small town of Brookdale, everyone knew him. Shop owners waved when he drove by. The mayor called him by his first name. And that familiarity had turned into something dangerous. Ryan had started to believe he was special, that the rules didn't really apply to him the way they applied to everyone else. It was a hot Tuesday afternoon in August when he spotted the silver sedan with out-of-state plates. The car wasn't speeding much, maybe 5 miles over the limit on the empty stretch of highway that cut through farm country. But Ryan was bored, and he had a quota to meet. More than that, he had a system that had been working for him for years. A system that had made him untouchable. Or so he thought. He flipped on his lights and pulled the car over. As he walked up to the driver's window, he put on that smile. The one that made people nervous. The one that said he was in charge here and they better remember it. The woman behind the wheel was dressed professionally. Business suit, neat hair, probably in her late 30s. She rolled down her window and looked at him calmly. Too calmly for Ryan's liking. Most people got nervous when he pulled them over. Their hands shook when they handed over their license. But this woman just looked at him and waited. License and registration, Ryan said, not bothering with pleasantries. She handed them over without a word. Her name was Jennifer Chen, according to her driver's license. California address. He glanced at the registration and then back at her. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" he asked, leaning against her car door. "You tell me, officer," she replied evenly. That tone, that calm, confident tone, it irritated him more than he wanted to admit. "You were doing 57 in a 50 zone," he said. "That's speeding." Jennifer's eyebrow raised slightly. 7 miles over? On an empty highway? "The speed limit is the speed limit," Ryan said, his jaw tightening. "Step out of the vehicle, please." "Why?" Jennifer asked. Still calm, still collected. "Because I'm asking you to," Ryan said, his voice getting harder. "Step out of the vehicle." This was the moment. The moment when most people complied because they were scared. Because they didn't want trouble. Because a police officer was telling them what to do and you don't argue with police officers. Especially not in a small town where you don't know anyone. Jennifer unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out. Ryan could see she was evaluating him, watching his every move. He didn't like it. "I'm going to need to search your vehicle," he announced. "On what grounds?" Jennifer asked. There it was again. That question, that challenge. Ryan had heard it before, but it usually came with stammering, with fear. "This woman wasn't afraid. I smell marijuana," Ryan lied smoothly. He'd used this line dozens of times before. "That gives me probable cause." "You smell marijuana," Jennifer repeated slowly as if tasting the words. "In my car." "That's right," Ryan said, already moving toward her vehicle. "Put your hands on the hood." What happened next was humiliating for Jennifer, though she tried not to show it. Ryan made her stand there on the side of the road while he went through her car. He took his time, making sure she felt every minute of it. He went through her glove compartment, her console under the seats. He opened her suitcase in the trunk and rifled through her clothes. He found nothing, of course, because there was nothing to find. But Ryan Hayes hadn't gotten this far by letting facts get in his way. When he was done, he walked back to his patrol car. Jennifer stood by her vehicle, arms crossed, watching him. She was angry now. He could see it in the set of her shoulders, the tightness around her mouth. Good. Angry people made mistakes. They said things they shouldn't say. They gave him more ammunition. Ryan sat in his car and started writing. Not a simple speeding ticket. No, that wouldn't teach her the lesson she needed to learn. He wrote her up for reckless driving, resisting arrest, and for good measure, possession of drug paraphernalia. He'd say he found a pipe under her seat. Who was going to contradict him? He walked back to her car and handed her the citations. 3 of them. Jennifer's face went pale as she read them. "This is completely false," she said, her voice shaking now. Not with fear, but with rage. "I wasn't driving recklessly. I didn't resist anything. And there's no drug paraphernalia in my car." "That's not what my report says," Ryan replied with a shrug. "You'll have your day in court if you want to dispute it. The court date is on the bottom there." "I want your badge number," Jennifer said. "I'm filing a complaint." Ryan actually laughed. He couldn't help it. "Badge number's on the citation. Good luck with that complaint." He leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "Let me give you some advice. You're not from around here. Everyone in this town knows me. The judge knows me. The prosecutor knows me. We all grew up together. So if you're smart, you'll just pay the fine and move on. Fighting this will cost you a lot more than money." He walked back to his patrol car, got in, and drove away. In his rearview mirror, he could see Jennifer standing there, citations in her hand, watching him go. Ryan felt good. He felt powerful. This was his town, his territory. He'd been doing this for years, and no one had ever really challenged him. Sure, there had been complaints. A few people had tried to fight back, but they always gave up eventually. The system protected him. The good old boy network in Brookdale was solid, unbreakable. What Ryan didn't know, couldn't have known in that moment, was that Jennifer Chen wasn't just some random woman passing through his town. She wasn't just another out-of-state driver he could bully and forget about. Jennifer was a civil rights attorney. Not just any attorney, but one who had spent the last 12 years of her career taking down corrupt police departments in 3 different states. She specialized in cases exactly like this. Police officers who thought they were above the law. Departments that protected bad cops instead of protecting citizens. She'd won millions in settlements. She'd gotten officers fired, prosecuted, sent to prison. She'd changed policies at the state level, and she was very, very good at her job. As Ryan drove away, feeling satisfied with himself, Jennifer was already making phone calls. She wasn't going home. She wasn't crying or feeling defeated. She was angry, yes. But more than that, she was focused. Because this was what she did. This was her life's work, and Ryan Hayes had just made the biggest mistake of his career. He'd thought his badge made him untouchable. He'd thought his connections, his history in Brookdale, his 15 years of getting away with this kind of behavior had built him an armor that no one could penetrate. He'd thought wrong. Jennifer stood on that dusty roadside watching his patrol car disappear into the heat shimmer of the afternoon, and she made herself a promise. Ryan Hayes was going to learn what it meant to be held accountable. He was going to learn that badges don't make you untouchable. They just make your fall from grace hurt more when it finally comes, and it was coming. Jennifer was going to make absolutely sure of that. She got back in her car, and instead of continuing to her mother's house, she turned around. She drove back into Brookdale and checked into the small motel on Main Street. She set up her laptop on the worn desk and got to work, because she had a feeling that Ryan Hayes hadn't just done this to her. Men like him never stopped at just one victim. They did it over and over, growing more confident each time they got away with it. And if that was true, if there were other victims out there, she was going to find them. Every single one. And then she was going to bring Ryan Hayes' whole world crashing down around him. The detective had called the wrong woman to court, and he was about to find out just how wrong he'd been. Jennifer didn't sleep much that night. The motel room was basic. The air conditioner rattled and the neon sign outside blinked on and off every few seconds. But that wasn't why she was awake. Her mind was racing, putting together pieces of a puzzle she knew existed. She'd seen this pattern before. Too many times before. By morning, she'd already found what she was looking for. Public records were her specialty, and small towns like Brookdale often didn't protect their data as carefully as they should. Court records, arrest records, traffic citations. All of it was there if you knew where to look. And Jennifer definitely knew where to look. Ryan Hayes had been busy. Over the past 5 years, he'd written citations in 43 cases that resulted in serious criminal charges. That number alone wasn't necessarily suspicious. But when Jennifer dug deeper, the pattern became clear. Almost all of them involved people from out of town. People passing through. People who wouldn't have local connections or resources to fight back effectively. Even more telling was what happened to those cases. Most ended in plea deals. People pleading guilty to reduce charges just to make the nightmare stop. A few cases were dismissed when evidence mysteriously disappeared. But barely anyone fought back, and those who did found themselves facing a wall of small-town solidarity that seemed impossible to climb. Jennifer made a list. Names, dates, charges, outcomes. She cross-referenced them with local news articles, social media posts, anything she could find. Then she started making phone calls. The first person she reached was a woman named Lisa Rodriguez. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice cautious. "My name is Jennifer Chen," she said. "I'm an attorney, and I was pulled over yesterday by Detective Ryan Hayes in Brookdale. He filed false charges against me." I'm trying to find out if this has happened to other people. There was a long silence on the other end. Then Lisa said quietly, "It happened to me 2 years ago." They talked for over an hour. Lisa's story was heartbreaking. She'd been driving home from visiting her sister when Ryan pulled her over for allegedly running a stop sign. He'd said he smelled alcohol. She'd agreed to a breathalyzer test and passed. 0 alcohol in her system. But Ryan had arrested her anyway, claiming she was impaired by drugs. The blood test came back clean weeks later. But by then, Lisa had lost her job as a nurse. Her employer couldn't keep someone on staff who'd been arrested for DUI, even if the charges were eventually dropped. "I tried to fight it," Lisa said, her voice breaking. "But my lawyer said it would be my word against a police officer's. He said I should just plead to reckless driving and move on. So I did, and it cost me everything. My job, my apartment, my reputation in this community. I had to move 3 hours away just to find nursing work again. I'm going to make this right," Jennifer told her. "But I need you to be willing to talk about what happened, to testify if necessary." "I don't know if I can," Lisa whispered. "I'm scared. He's still out there. He still has that badge." "Not for much longer," Jennifer said with certainty. "Trust me." The next call was to a man named Robert Kim. He was a college professor who'd been stopped by Ryan 3 years earlier. Same pattern. Ryan claimed Robert made an illegal turn, then escalated the situation until Robert was charged with assaulting an officer. Robert swore he never touched him, that Ryan had grabbed his arm and then claimed Robert pushed him first. "It cost me $30,000 in legal fees," Robert said, "and I still ended up with a criminal record. I took a plea deal because I couldn't afford to keep fighting. My lawyer said juries always believe police officers. I had no witnesses except Ryan's partner, who backed up his story." Jennifer found 6 more victims that first day. Each story was similar but uniquely painful. A single mother who'd spent 3 days in jail on false drug charges and temporarily lost custody of her kids. A retired veteran who'd been roughed up during a traffic stop and charged with resisting arrest. A young couple on their honeymoon who'd been detained for hours and had their wedding rings photographed as suspicious jewelry that might be stolen. Every single case had the same elements. Ryan's word against theirs, no working body camera footage, charges serious enough to scare people into plea deals, and a local legal system that seemed designed to protect Ryan instead of pursuing actual justice. But Jennifer also noticed something else in the records. Something that made her blood boil. Brookdale County had collected over $800,000 in fines, fees, and court costs from Ryan's arrests over 5 years. The money went into the county budget. It funded programs. It paid salaries. The system wasn't just protecting Ryan Hayes, it was profiting from him. On her 3rd day in Brookdale, Jennifer visited the county clerk's office to file her formal complaint. The clerk, an older woman with kind eyes, processed her paperwork quietly. But as Jennifer was leaving, the woman called after her. "Miss Chen, wait." Jennifer turned back. The clerk looked around nervously, then lowered her voice. "You're not the first person to file a complaint about Detective Hayes," she said. "But you're the first one who seems like you might actually do something about it. The others, they always disappear. The complaints get lost or dismissed. I've worked here for 23 years and I've seen it happen over and over." "How many complaints?" Jennifer asked. The clerk hesitated. "Officially, I can't tell you that. But unofficially," she glanced around again, "more than a dozen in the last 3 years alone. They all go to the sheriff's office. And Sheriff Dawson and Detective Hayes are best friends. Have been since high school." Jennifer felt a cold fury settle in her chest. This wasn't just one bad cop. This was systematic corruption. A network of people protecting each other, looking the other way, benefiting from the abuse of power. "Thank you," Jennifer said to the clerk. "What you just told me might help a lot of people." That evening, Jennifer sat in her motel room and made a decision. She wasn't going to just fight her own case. She was going to burn this whole corrupt system to the ground and rebuild it the right way. She called her law firm back in California and told them she'd be taking an extended leave. Then she called her friend James Bradford, a federal civil rights attorney who owed her a favor. "I need your help," she told him. "And I'm going to need federal involvement on this one. Civil rights violations, systematic abuse of power, possible conspiracy." "Tell me everything," James said. She did. When she was done, James was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'm on the next flight out." We're going to destroy this guy. Jennifer also did something else that would prove crucial. She filed a motion with the federal court to preserve all evidence related to her case. That meant Ryan couldn't destroy his dashcam footage, his arrest reports, or any other documentation. It also meant the sheriff's office couldn't make complaints disappear anymore. The next morning, Jennifer showed up at the Brookdale Police Department and requested all of Ryan's personnel files. Under the Freedom of Information Act, the desk sergeant looked at her like she was crazy. "Those are confidential," he said. "Actually, under state law, complaints against officers are public record," Jennifer replied calmly. "I'd like them by the end of the week, please." She left before he could respond. She knew they'd fight her request, but she also knew she'd win, because the law was on her side, even if it didn't feel like it yet. That night, Ryan Hayes drove past Jennifer's motel. He knew she was still in town. Word traveled fast in Brookdale, and several people had mentioned seeing her around asking questions. It bothered him more than he wanted to admit. Most people tucked their tail and left after a few days. Why was she still here? He thought about pulling her over again, finding some reason to arrest her. But something told him that might not be smart. She seemed different from his usual targets. More determined, more dangerous. Still, Ryan wasn't too worried. He'd been through complaints before. They never went anywhere. The system protected him. His friends protected him. He'd be fine. What Ryan didn't realize was that the wheels were already in motion. Federal investigators were being contacted. Evidence was being preserved. Victims were finding their courage. And Jennifer Chen was building a case that would become one of the most significant police accountability lawsuits in the state's history. Ryan had thought his badge made him untouchable. He'd been wrong, and Jennifer was about to prove it. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks after Jennifer's traffic stop. Ryan expected it to be routine. Show up, give his testimony, watch the out-of-towner either take a plea deal or get steamrolled by Judge Raymond Holt. Ray was an old friend. They'd played football together in high school. Ray understood how things worked in Brookdale, but when Ryan walked into the courtroom that morning, he immediately knew something was different. The gallery was full. That never happened for a simple traffic case. There were reporters there. Local news, yes, but also journalists from the state capitol. Some had cameras. Others had notebooks. Why were they here? Then he saw Jennifer. She wasn't alone. There was another lawyer with her, a tall man in an expensive suit who looked like he belonged in a big city courtroom, not in Brookdale's small county building. They were setting up a laptop and what looked like a portable projector. Ryan felt his first flutter of unease. He pushed it down. He'd done this 100 times. The judge was on his side. The prosecutor knew the routine. This would be fine. Judge Holt entered the courtroom and everyone stood. He was a large man with graying hair and a face that usually looked friendly. Today, though, he seemed tense. His eyes swept the courtroom, taking in the reporters, and Ryan saw his jaw tighten. "This is a preliminary hearing for the state versus Jennifer Chen," Judge Holt announced. "The defendant is charged with reckless driving, resisting arrest, and possession of drug paraphernalia. Let's keep this brief and professional." The prosecutor, Karen Mills, was a relatively new addition to the county. She'd only been there for 2 years, having moved from a larger city. She presented the charges and called Ryan to the stand. Ryan took the oath and sat down. He'd given this testimony dozens of times. He knew exactly what to say. He described pulling Jennifer over for speeding, detecting the smell of marijuana, conducting a lawful search, and finding drug paraphernalia under her seat. He said she'd been verbally combative and had pulled away when he tried to conduct a safety pat-down, which constituted resisting arrest. It all sounded professional, reasonable, exactly the kind of testimony that usually went unchallenged. Then Jennifer stood up to cross-examine him. "Detective Hayes," she began, her voice calm and clear, "you said in your testimony that you smelled marijuana coming from my vehicle. Is that correct?" "Yes, ma'am." "And that gave you probable cause to search?" "That's correct." "Were you wearing your body camera during this stop?" Ryan shifted slightly. "Yes." "And is that body camera footage available for the court to review?" "Unfortunately, there was a technical malfunction," Ryan said smoothly. He'd used this line many times before. "The camera failed to record. IS." Jennifer said. Technical malfunction. Was your dash cam working? It was. And do you have that footage? Ryan hesitated. He'd been told the footage had been preserved because of Jennifer's federal motion. He couldn't lie about this. Yes, Your Honor, Jennifer said, turning to the judge. I'd like to present Defense Exhibit A. This is the dash cam footage from Detective Hayes' patrol car on the day in question. Judge Holt looked uncomfortable. Miss Chen, this is just a preliminary hearing. I'm not sure that's necessary. Your Honor, the defendant has a right to challenge the probable cause for the search and arrest, the man in the expensive suit said, standing up. I'm James Bradford, federal civil rights attorney representing Miss Chen. This footage is directly relevant to whether the charges should proceed. Judge Holt clearly wanted to say no, but with all the reporters watching, with a federal attorney invoking constitutional rights, he couldn't. Proceed. The lights dimmed and the footage began to play on the screen. Everyone in the courtroom watched in silence. The video showed exactly what had happened. Jennifer's car maintaining a steady speed. No erratic driving. The traffic stop. Jennifer calmly handing over her license and registration. Her polite questions. Ryan ordering her out of the car with increasing aggression in his voice. The search. And then, crucially, the moment when Ryan walked back to his patrol car. The audio was clear, crystal clear. You could hear Ryan muttering to himself as he wrote up the citations. Thinks she can question me? I'll teach her. The courtroom was silent when the footage ended. Ryan felt sweat forming on his forehead. He'd forgotten the dash cam audio picked up his voice when he was that close to the car. He'd been careless. Detective Hayes, Jennifer continued, her voice still calm. In that footage, we can all see that my driving was normal. We can hear that I was polite and cooperative. We can see that you conducted the search, and we can see that you found nothing. Is that accurate? The footage doesn't show everything, Ryan started. What doesn't it show? Jennifer interrupted. Does it show me driving recklessly? No, but does it show me resisting arrest? You pulled away when The footage shows me standing still while you searched my vehicle. Does it show me pulling away? Ryan was silent. And the drug paraphernalia you claim to have found under my seat. If you found it during the search, why isn't that on the video? I found it after the video ends. So you found this mysterious drug paraphernalia after you'd already decided to charge me with reckless driving and resisting arrest? Even though neither of those things happened? Ryan could feel the eyes of everyone in the courtroom on him. The reporters were writing furiously. Judge Holt was staring at him with an expression Ryan had never seen before. Disappointment mixed with anger, but Jennifer wasn't done. Your Honor, I'd like to present Defense Exhibit B. This is a statistical analysis of Detective Hayes' traffic stops and arrests over the past 5 years. Objection? Karen Mills said, standing up quickly. This is beyond the scope of this hearing, Your Honor. James Bradford said, we're establishing a pattern of behavior that goes directly to the credibility of the witness and the legitimacy of these charges. Judge Holt looked like he wanted to sustain the objection. But again, the reporters were watching. The federal attorney was watching. Everything he said here could end up in a larger case. I'll allow it, but keep it brief. Jennifer pulled up charts and numbers on the screen. Detective Hayes has conducted 43 traffic stops in the past 5 years that resulted in serious criminal charges. 43. His fellow officers averaged 3 such stops each over the same period. Of those 43 stops, Detective Hayes' body camera malfunctioned in 41 of them. That's a failure rate of 95%. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Jennifer continued. Of those 43 cases, 38 involved drivers from out of state or out of town. People passing through Brookdale. People who wouldn't have local connections or knowledge of the system. People who would be easy to intimidate into plea deals. She pulled up more data. The demographic breakdown is also telling. Detective Hayes stops Black and Latino drivers at a rate 600% higher than his fellow officers. Women traveling alone make up 60% of his arrests. Your Honor, this is turning into a trial of Detective Hayes, Karen Mills protested. She looked genuinely disturbed now, not just professionally obligated to object. That's exactly what this is, Jennifer said sharply. Because Detective Hayes is the one on trial here. I'm the victim. These charges are fabricated and the evidence proves it. The dashcam proves it. The statistics prove it. And if you let me, I can bring 12 other victims into this courtroom right now to prove it. Judge Holt raised his hand. That won't be necessary. I've seen enough. The courtroom went silent. Ryan felt his heart pounding. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. This wasn't how it ever went. Miss Chen, Judge Holt said slowly, the charges against you are dismissed. All of them. There's clearly no evidence to support them. Relief flooded through Ryan for just a moment. Dismissed. It was over. He could go back to... However, Judge Holt continued, I'm extremely troubled by what I've seen here today. Miss Mills, I'm recommending that your office conduct a thorough review of all cases involving Detective Hayes. And I'm forwarding this matter to the State Police Internal Affairs Division. The courtroom erupted. Reporters rushed for the doors, phones already to their ears. Ryan sat frozen in the witness chair. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. Judge Holt banged his gavel. This hearing is adjourned. As people filed out, Ryan finally stood up. His legs felt weak. Karen Mills wouldn't look at him. Judge Holt had already left through his private door. And Jennifer Chen stood by her table, packing up her laptop, looking directly at him. Their eyes met across the courtroom. She didn't smile, didn't gloat, just looked at him with an expression that said everything. This is just the beginning. Ryan left the courthouse through a side door, trying to avoid the reporters. But they found him anyway. Cameras and microphones were shoved in his face. Questions were shouted at him. Detective Hayes, do you have a comment on the allegations? Is it true your body camera has failed 41 times? Did you file false charges against Miss Chen? Ryan pushed through them without answering and got into his patrol car. His hands were shaking as he started the engine. For the first time in 15 years, his badge felt heavy, like a weight around his neck instead of a shield protecting him. He drove home in silence, his mind racing. Maybe this would blow over. Maybe people would forget about it. Maybe his friends would protect him like they always had. But deep down, Ryan knew the truth. Everything had changed today. The armor he'd built over 15 years had just gotten its first crack. And Jennifer Chen was going to keep hammering at it until the whole thing shattered. The local news story aired that evening. By the next morning, it had gone viral. Videos of the dashcam footage spread across social media. News outlets from across the state picked it up. By afternoon, national news was running segments about the small-town detective with a pattern of false arrests. Ryan watched it unfold from his living room, his phone buzzing constantly with calls he didn't answer. His wife, Patricia, sat across from him, arms crossed, face tight with anger and fear. Tell me it's not true, she said for the third time. Tell me you didn't do what they're saying. Ryan couldn't look at her. It's being blown out of proportion. That woman is making a big deal out of nothing. 43 arrests, Ryan. 41 body camera failures. That's not nothing. It's complicated. You don't understand how police work actually works. Then explain it to me, Patricia said. Because right now what I understand is that my husband might have been falsely arresting people for years. What I understand is that reporters are parked outside our house. What I understand is that our kids are asking me why their dad is on TV. Ryan had no answer. Patricia stood up, tears in her eyes. I'm taking the kids to my sister's for a few days. You need to figure this out. She left that afternoon. Ryan sat alone in the house that suddenly felt too big and too quiet. The next day, Ryan was called into Sheriff Tom Dawson's office. Tom was his oldest friend. They'd grown up together, played sports together, been in each other's weddings. Tom would have his back. He always had. But when Ryan walked into the office, Tom's expression was cold. Sit down, Tom said. Ryan sat. Tom, listen, this whole thing is... I've been getting calls, Ryan, lots of calls. The governor's office, the state attorney general, the FBI. Tom rubbed his face tiredly. The FBI, Ryan, they're opening a civil rights investigation. That's ridiculous. This is one attorney making noise. One attorney who found 12 other victims willing to testify. One attorney who's now filed a federal lawsuit against you, the department and the county for systematic civil rights violations. One attorney who's gotten the state to launch an audit of all our arrests for the past 5 years. Tom leaned forward. Is it true about the body cameras? Sometimes there are technical problems. 41 times? In cases where you're the only witness to serious criminal behavior? Tom's voice rose. Help me understand, Ryan. Because I'm looking at this data and I can't explain it away. I can't protect you from this. You've always protected me before, Ryan said. Eh? And immediately regretted it. Tom's face went red. Protected you from what exactly? What have you been doing? Ryan stood up. I'm not discussing this without a lawyer. Then get a lawyer. Because as of right now, you're on administrative leave. Badge and gun. On my desk now. Ryan felt like he'd been punched. Tom, we're friends. We've been friends since we were kids. Yeah, well, maybe I don't know who you really are, Tom said quietly. Badge and gun, Ryan. Ryan unclipped his badge and laid it on the desk. Then his service weapon. Tom took them without looking at him. Don't leave town, Tom said. You'll probably be hearing from Internal Affairs soon. Ryan left the sheriff's office feeling numb. He drove home in his personal car, not his patrol vehicle, which had been impounded for evidence. The reporters were still outside his house. He pushed past them without comment. Inside, he called the best defense attorney he could afford. The lawyer's name was Michael Torres, and his hourly rate made Ryan's stomach turn, but he had no choice. This was his life, his freedom on the line. They met the next day. Ryan explained everything. Well, almost everything. He downplayed some things, made others sound more reasonable than they were. Torres listened without expression. How bad is it? Ryan finally asked. Bad, Torres said bluntly. The dashcam footage alone is damaging. But combined with the statistical pattern, the other victims, the body camera failures, this isn't going to be easy to defend. But you can defend it, right? I mean, that's your job. My job is to give you the best defense possible, but I'm going to be honest with you. If even half of what's being alleged is true, you're looking at serious criminal charges, official misconduct, filing false reports, deprivation of civil rights under federal law. That last one carries up to 10 years per violation. Ryan felt the room spin. 10 years? Per violation, Torres repeated. And they're alleging 43 violations. Over the next 2 weeks, Ryan's world continued to collapse. The state attorney general announced a formal criminal investigation. The FBI expanded their inquiry. And then Karen Mills, the assistant district attorney, did something that shocked everyone. She called a press conference. Ryan watched it on TV, disbelief growing with every word she spoke. After reviewing the evidence in the Jennifer Chen case and examining patterns in other cases involving Detective Hayes, I can no longer in good conscience participate in any prosecution that relies solely on his testimony, Karen said, her voice steady but emotional. I have discovered evidence that complaints against Detective Hayes were systematically ignored or suppressed. I have found internal emails showing that concerns about his conduct were discussed but never properly investigated. She paused, taking a breath. I became a prosecutor to seek justice, not to be part of covering up injustice. I am cooperating fully with state and federal investigators. I am also resigning from my position, effective immediately, because I cannot continue to work in a system that values protecting its own over protecting the community. The press conference ended. Ryan sat in stunned silence. Karen had been his ally. She'd prosecuted his cases, backed up his arrests, and now she was testifying against him. The dominoes continued to fall. An independent audit revealed that Brookdale County had collected over $890,000 in fines and fees from Ryan's arrests over 5 years. The county commissioners were called to testify about how that money had been used. They squirmed and deflected, but the damage was done. The public could see clearly now. Ryan hadn't just been a bad cop. He'd been a profit center. Judge Holt announced his retirement, claiming health reasons. Everyone knew it was because Jennifer had filed judicial ethics complaints detailing his personal relationships with Ryan and his failure to properly oversee cases. A judge from another county was brought in to handle all related proceedings. Ryan's former partner, Officer Mike Stevens, was called in for questioning. Mike had backed up Ryan's stories dozens of times, but when federal investigators sat him down and explained that he could be charged as an accessory if he continued to lie, Mike broke. He admitted that he'd seen Ryan plant evidence twice, that he'd been told to say certain things in reports, that the whole department knew Ryan was dirty but nobody wanted to be the one to speak up. Sheriff Dawson tried to control the damage, but it was too late. A recall petition circulated through the county. Within days, it had more than enough signatures. Tom would face a recall election, and the polls showed him losing badly. Ryan sat at his kitchen table staring at his legal bills. He'd burned through his savings. His pension was in jeopardy. His marriage was falling apart. Friends weren't returning his calls. And every day brought new revelations, new victims coming forward. New evidence of just how deep his corruption had run. The formal charges came on a Tuesday afternoon. A state prosecutor accompanied by state police officers arrived at Ryan's door. Not Tom Dawson's deputies. Not anyone from Brookdale. State police who had no loyalty to the Old Boy network. Ryan Hayes, you're under arrest for official misconduct, filing false police reports, false imprisonment, and civil rights violations under federal statute. They read him his rights, put handcuffs on him, led him out of his house in front of the reporters and neighbors who'd gathered to watch. Ryan kept his head down, but he could feel their eyes on him, judging him, hating him. At the station, they took his fingerprints and his photograph. The booking process was humiliating. He'd done this to dozens of people. Now he was on the other side of it. They put him in a cell and he sat there on the hard bench, staring at the concrete walls. All his life, Ryan had believed he was special, that his badge gave him power and protection, that the system would always have his back. He'd been wrong about all of it. The badge hadn't protected him. It had just given him enough rope to hang himself with, and Jennifer Chen had been there to pull the lever. Bail was set at $100,000. Ryan's lawyer posted it using Ryan's house as collateral. He was released with an ankle monitor and strict instructions not to leave the county. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd told Jennifer those same words just weeks ago. Ryan went home to his empty house. His family was gone. His career was gone. His reputation was destroyed. And the trial hadn't even started yet. When it did, he knew what the verdict would be. The evidence was overwhelming. His own actions had condemned him. He thought his badge had made him untouchable. Now he knew the truth. Nothing makes you untouchable, especially not when you abuse the very authority you're supposed to use to protect people. Jennifer Chen had tried to tell him that. He just hadn't listened until it was too late. The trial lasted 3 weeks, and every day the courtroom was packed. People from all over the state came to watch. Victims came. Reporters came. Civil rights advocates came. And Jennifer Chen was there every single day, sitting in the front row, watching justice finally catch up with Ryan Hayes. The prosecution's case was devastating. They brought the dash cam footage that showed Ryan's lies in perfect clarity. They brought the statistical analysis that showed his pattern of targeting vulnerable people. They brought the body camera records showing 41 suspicious failures. And most importantly, they brought the victims. Lisa Rodriguez testified about losing her nursing job over false DUI charges. She cried on the stand as she described how her life had fallen apart over something that never happened. The jury listened in silence. Robert Kim described his arrest for assaulting an officer, charges he swore were completely fabricated. He'd lost $30,000 in legal fees and ended up with a criminal record for a crime he didn't commit. His voice shook with anger as he recounted how powerless he'd felt against a man with a badge. One by one, they came. The single mother who'd lost custody of her children, the elderly veteran who'd been roughed up and humiliated, the young couple whose honeymoon had turned into a nightmare. Each story was different, but the pattern was the same. Ryan Hayes had used his badge as a weapon against people who couldn't fight back. The financial records showed the ugly truth about why the system had protected him for so long. Brookdale County had made nearly $900,000 from his arrests. That money had gone into the budget. It had paid for programs and salaries. People had benefited from Ryan's corruption, even if they hadn't directly participated in it. That created an incentive to look the other way, to make complaints disappear, to protect him rather than his victims. Ryan's defense attorney did his best. He argued that Ryan had been doing a difficult job in tough circumstances, that split-second decisions in the field shouldn't be judged harshly from the comfort of a courtroom, that some of the complainants were unreliable witnesses with their own problems and motivations, but it wasn't enough. Not against the weight of evidence, not against the testimony of 14 victims, not against Ryan's own words on the dash cam recording, muttering about teaching Jennifer a lesson. On the final day of testimony, Ryan took the stand. His lawyer had advised against it, but Ryan insisted. He wanted to tell his side. He wanted people to understand it was a disaster. Under cross-examination, he couldn't explain the body camera failures. He couldn't explain why he'd lied about smelling marijuana in Jennifer's car. He couldn't explain the statistical patterns. Ever. The answer he gave only made things worse. Did you plant evidence in any of these cases? the prosecutor asked. No, Ryan said firmly. But Officer Stevens testified that he saw you do exactly that on 2 occasions.
Was he lying?
He must have misunderstood what he saw. And the 12 victims who testified, are they all lying? They're misremembering, or they're angry and want someone to blame. All 12 of them? Ryan had no good answer. The jury's faces told him everything he needed to know. They didn't believe him. Why would they? The evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, Ryan stood to hear the verdict. His hands were shaking. His lawyer stood beside him, face grim. On the charge of official misconduct, we find the defendant guilty. Ryan's knees went weak. On the charge of filing false police reports, we find the defendant guilty. His lawyer put a hand on his arm to steady him. On the charge of false imprisonment, we find the defendant guilty. The list continued. Guilty, guilty, guilty. 14 counts total. The jury had believed the victims. They'd seen through Ryan's lies. They'd held him accountable. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Ryan stood before the judge, a different judge than Raymond Holt, someone who had no personal connection to him or his family. Someone who could see clearly what he'd done. The judge didn't mince words. Mr. Hayes, you were given extraordinary power and authority. You were supposed to protect and serve your community. Instead, you used your badge as a weapon to abuse innocent people. You targeted the vulnerable. You fabricated evidence. You lied under oath. And you did it systematically for years, while the system that should have stopped you looked the other way. The judge sentenced him to 8 years in federal prison. Ryan would also lose his pension, all of it. He'd have to pay $340,000 in restitution to his victims, and his law enforcement certification was permanently revoked. He would never wear a badge again. Ryan was led away in handcuffs. As he passed Jennifer in the courtroom, their eyes met one last time. He wanted to say something, to explain, to apologize maybe, but what could he possibly say? She'd been right about everything. He had thought his badge made him untouchable. He'd been wrong, but the story didn't end with Ryan's conviction. That was just the beginning of real change. Jennifer's federal civil rights lawsuit against Brookdale County went to trial 6 months later. The county tried to settle, offering $200,000. Jennifer refused. This wasn't about money. This was about forcing systematic change. The trial revealed even more corruption. Internal emails showed that Sheriff Dawson had received 17 formal complaints about Ryan over 3 years and had ignored all of them. There were text messages joking about managing the PR when victims complained. There was evidence of other officers engaging in similar behavior, though not as extensively as Ryan. The jury awarded Jennifer and the other plaintiffs $4.7 million in damages. But more importantly, the settlement included a consent decree. Brookdale Police Department would be under federal oversight for 5 years. They would have to implement mandatory body cameras that couldn't be disabled. They would have to create an independent civilian review board for complaints. They would have to conduct quarterly audits of all traffic stops and arrests, looking for racial or other biases. The case sparked change beyond Brookdale, too. The state legislature, pressured by civil rights groups and media attention, passed new laws. They called it the Accountability in Law Enforcement Act. It created statewide standards for police oversight. It made it easier to decertify officers with patterns of misconduct. It required transparency in complaint processes. It provided protections for officers who reported misconduct by their colleagues. Jennifer traveled the state, speaking about the case, about police accountability, about the importance of standing up even when the system seems designed to crush you. She became a voice for reform, invited to consult on policy changes in multiple states. But perhaps the most meaningful changes happened to the individual victims. Lisa Rodriguez got her nursing license fully restored and found a good job at a hospital in the state capital. The assault charges against Robert Kim were expunged from his record, and he received compensation that covered his legal fees and more. The single mother regained full custody of her children and used her settlement money to buy a small house. One by one, the people Ryan had hurt began to heal. They got their lives back. Their names were cleared, and they learned that the system could work for them, not just against them. It required incredible courage to come forward, to testify, to relive their trauma in public. But they'd done it. And they'd won. 6 months after Ryan's conviction, Jennifer stood in Brookdale's town square at a community healing event. Former victims spoke about their experiences and their recovery. Reform activists celebrated the changes that had been made. Even some police officers attended. Good cops who'd been disturbed by Ryan's behavior but hadn't known how to stop it. A young woman approached Jennifer after the speeches. She was maybe 25, tears in her eyes. "I was too scared to come forward during the trial," she said quietly. "Detective Hayes pulled me over 3 years ago. He did things that I couldn't prove. Things that weren't on camera. I just paid the ticket and tried to forget. But I never forgot. And when I saw you fight back, when I saw that other people were speaking up, I wished I'd been braver." Jennifer took her hands. "You're brave now. That's what matters. And because we fought, because we changed the system, what happened to you is less likely to happen to someone else." The young woman nodded, wiping her eyes. "Thank you. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for being strong enough to fight when everyone told you to just move on." Jennifer thought about that day on the highway, the anger she'd felt when Ryan handed her those false citations, the determination that had carried her through months of investigation and legal battles, the fear she'd felt sometimes, wondering if taking on an entire corrupt system was foolish, but she'd done it anyway, because that's what justice required, not just for herself but for everyone Ryan had hurt, for everyone who'd been too scared or too poor or too tired to fight back. Ryan Hayes had thought his badge made him untouchable. He'd thought power meant never having to answer for his actions. He'd thought the system would always protect him. He'd learned the hard way that in America no one is supposed to be above the law, not even those sworn to enforce it. Sometimes that promise takes too long to fulfill. Sometimes it requires extraordinary courage from ordinary people. Sometimes the system fails before it finally works, but it can work. Justice can prevail, not because the system is perfect, but because people like Jennifer Chen refuse to accept injustice. Because victims find their voices. Because good people inside broken systems sometimes find their courage. Because we keep pushing, keep fighting, keep demanding better. Ryan Hayes sat in his prison cell, thinking about choices and consequences. About power and responsibility. About the life he'd wasted and the lives he'd damaged. He had 7.5 years left on his sentence. 7.5 years to think about the day he pulled over the wrong woman. The woman who'd refused to be a victim. The woman who'd turned his weapon of a badge against him. The woman who'd proven that badges don't make you untouchable. They just make your fall from grace that much farther when justice finally catches up.